I am Thor, son of Odin, and as long as there is life in my breast, I am running out of things to say.
Great, another broken white boy for us to fix.
That's my secret, Cat. I'm always angry.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are. With great power comes great responsibility. I can do this all day.
Wakanda forever!
And welcome, Internet, to another episode of Views from the 616, the blackest MCU podcast in the multiverse, powered by For All Nerds, where we discuss everything in the MCU from the perspective of people of color. And it is one of your hosts, Tatiana King, a.k.a. Tesseract Thompson, a.k.a. the Wicked Witch of the West View, a.k.a. the Wrath of Khonshu, a.k.a. Baptin of Meribah. And as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host.
It's your boy, DJ Ben Amin, a.k.a. Black Goliath. Ben Amin, DJ by night. Black the King Kirby. Briss Blairmont, Tanda Manley, Brother Voodoo Child, NBA Youngboy Never Blipped Again.
You're...
Universal Fan Khonshu.
I am dead. A few people will get that one. That being said, thanks everybody. Welcome back to Views from the 616. We miss you. We hope you missed us because we're back to talk all things Moon Knight. Before we get into this week's episode, let me first thank Dr. Drea Letamendi. She was on our previous episode. If you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you bookmark that and come back later because Dr. Drea is a licensed psychologist that got mad experience, mad things to say about this, and some amazing insight when it comes to understanding the world and the mind of Moon Knight and Mark Spector and Stephen Grant and everyone therein. So we had a blast having a conversation with her, Ben Amin and I. And I've learned so much, even beyond what I was already thinking. And it was just it felt so good to talk to someone who like has the letters behind their name that knows what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. It can help explain to us what's going on in this man's mind right now.
Yeah, I think that was literally a legendary episode. You know, we've done...
For sure.
Yeah, you know, Views from the 616 has been killing it. We've interviewed creators from most of these shows, but having someone to talk the science and the mental health behind Moon Knight, I mean, come on, man. Where else you going to find content like this?
Only here, the most fire content in the land. And let's get right into the next content here, which is our review of episode 4 of Moon Knight titled The Tomb. Here's the basic plot. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark meets The Mummy on this episode of Moon Knight. As Mark and Steven learn what it's like to live without Khonshu, Harold gets a haircut and Layla learns the truth that she can't handle the truth.
Really can't.
So, Ben, this was one of the most topsy-turvy episodes, obviously, of this series, but also in general, because the way that, and I think I said this on the last episode for episode 3, like the way that the writers are in some ways weaponizing the idea of the unreliable narrator, weaponizing the mental issues that is going on in Steven/Mark's brain, and then making us wild confused about exactly what's going on, what's real, what's not, and where everything is happening, right? All right, Ben, so let's get right into it.
It's the themes
of the episode.
Huzzah.
And the first theme that we have, it's several pieces here. It's titled Wake Up! Or Wake Up! If you're Spike Lee.
Thank you for knowing that one, Tatiana. I wasn't sure if you knew about that one.
I knew about that one.
Thank you. Because as soon as Harrow hit that line, I was like... Look at Defiant over here, ringing the bell, waking all the kids up.
It's time to wake up out your subconscious. Open your third eye.
Wake up. Lawrence Fishburne, the God, folks, the God. If you don't know, better ask somebody.
Also in this theme, we're also going to be talking about, is it all a dream or what is real, right? You know, that's the other part of waking up. Like typically you're waking up out of sleep or out of a haze or something like that. Mm-hmm. And besides the actual people saying several times this episode to wake up, there are also things happening that make us think, okay, wait a fucking moment. Did Mark just dream all this shit up? Is this all in his head or is there something else happening here? I'm going for the latter, but let's just talk about these whole wake up lines, right? Like,
Okay.
right in the beginning when the episode starts, you have, Marcus Stevens passed out because they performed the great rotation of the sky, 1,000 nights in the past. And Layla's just saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. She's talking to both of them about waking up. Like, obviously, wake up, get up, it's time to go. But also like, hey, yo, we need to figure this shit out. You understand? Later in the episode, Layla, when she's speaking to Mark Stevens, she's explaining about her father and what he does. And she said that he's an archaeologist that was on a mission. And that idea, that lifestyle was to him a dream worth dying for. Again, that concept of dreams and waking up and all this other stuff. So, and she said, and he did, right? Like, yes, the literal death, the true death that her father has suffered.
Lifestyle.
Facts. Yeah. And you actually already, we said it at the top, but Harold kind of reminiscing on the Spike Lee version of Wake Up. Harold yelling, wake up! To Layla.
Like, out of nowhere, dog. It was like he was just talking normal.
Well, first of all, that whole scene this is when Layla was going through the canyon of darkness and she's on the other side of the canyon. Harold popped out of nowhere. She just looked up and it was that nigga just looking in the doorway, just watching. Like, he was like, oh, you did that pretty well. And I'm just like, nigga, you was watching me fuck up and almost die this whole time.
I know, right? What if she hadn't done it off? Like, and can we talk about that? Like, where did this mummy monster thing come from? Who was the dude who later turns up in the psych ward, but he's getting his stomach ate out by this mummy thing? Like, what?
Well, we'll explain the mummies in a minute, but let me just continue with Harold, right?
I need help because I was like, all right, it's just, I get it. You in a, tomb, there's a mummy, I get it.
But they explain who these mummies are. They explain what these are, and I'll explain it too. Help me, nigga.
Help me. That's what my man was saying when he was on the table. Help me. I see y'all over there hiding. Help me.
After Harold yelled, wake up to Layla, like he's telling her, there's a few ways he's saying what he's saying, right? He's saying her to wake up, open your eyes to the truth. It's also, as we see that this dual concept of an episode, that this is really happening. There's this, Tomb Raider shit going on. And then this is really just Mark dreaming up shit in a psychiatric hospital. So if you're looking at it from the adventure side, it's literally him. It's literally Harold yelling to Layla, hey, yo, you need to get your shit together. You need to wake up and see the truth. But also to have another purpose, right? Like, because if the rest of the episodes to be believed, Harold's actually a psychiatrist in this psychiatric hospital. And he could be, for example, he could be in a session with Layla. He could have her on hypnosis and telling her to wake up, right? Or telling her to try to bring her out of whatever the mental confusion, whatever she may be in.
No. No. She was in the cave fighting a mummy. That happened.
Fighting the mummy.
Yeah.
And let's
wrestling with some polar bears.
Let's talk more about this psychiatric hospital, because what's interesting is, even though it only served like the last 10 minutes of this 45-minute episode, to me it was the most impactful for obvious reasons. Yes, because it was just out of left field, but also it was impactful because of all of the different symbolisms and things you saw going on. First of all, the name of this hospital, it has a name. It's called Putnam Psychiatric Hospital. And this is actually a real location within the Marvel universe, within the comic books. When Mark's multiple personalities first started manifesting, his father, Elias Spector, actually interned him here at Putnam Psychiatric Hospital, which is located in Chicago, which is where we believe Mark to be from.
Oh, yep. And that's definitely that run in the comic books. They touch on that a lot. The run, we talked about it on the episode with Dr. Drea, the Jeff Lemire run of Moon Knight. I'm hoping I got that right. Yeah, the Jeff Lemire run of Moon Knight is where most of this stuff is drawn from, where it's all taking place within his mind. You're wondering what is real, what isn't. He's in this psych ward, and then he's not in the psych ward. He's battling God's Khonshu's there. The version of Khonshu that we see in the show is from that run. A lot of stuff comes from that run, so definitely pick that up if you haven't yet. It's very well worth it. It's an amazing run of Moon Knight.
Absolutely. And also, if you guys remember, what was it, episode 2 to episode 3, where we saw the QR code that was on the museum wall? If you keep visiting that coda every week, you get access to a new Moon Knight comic. And typically those comics, each issue that they put up, those give you some insight into the themes of the episode, but also insight into like how they decided to draw the story.
Yep, and it is by Jeff Lemire, so I did have that right. I just wanted to make sure, and it's fantastic. So pick that up.
Cool. We also see that this whole this is giving me Get Out vibes. Like the whole sequence giving me Get Out
come
vibes.
on, super. It was super falling into the sunken place.
Right. So like when Harrow shoots Mark in the chest, 2 shots to the heart.
Double tapped his ass.
For real. He falls back into the water, but he doesn't just stop. And first of all, we know the water is shallow, right? It's a shallow pool, but he keeps going. If you remember, if you watch Get Out, most people have, he just kept falling into like this abyss of, it seemed like it could be water, but he was completely dry, whatever. Mark seems to die and fall into this sunken place after being shot. And he wakes up into a mental institution. And again, this is the whole concept of waking up. Like, where are you waking up into, right? Giving me shades of Inception as well. Like, what level of the mind are you on now? Like, are you even fully awake, right? And it begs the question again, is all of this adventure that we've seen all the last 4 episodes, has this actually occurred? Is it occurring? Or is it a giant delusion of grandeur dreamed up by this psych patient named Mark Spector? Is it just a manifestation? Is the psychiatric hospital a manifestation of the mess going on in Mark's mind? Or is it an actual place?
All very legit questions, and I'm not sure the answers. Now, if you watched our early, when we reviewed all 4 episodes, gave you a preview of everything, we definitely talked about how there are some influences from the show Legion, which was an FX show that was basically took place in the Marvel Universe in, I guess, a pocket alternate, at this point, you would call them a variant Marvel Universe.
You would call it, what do they call the timeline splits? A branch.
Yeah, a branch. Yeah. Where it featured a story told about Legion, who from the comic books is something Haller, I can't remember his first name, and he's Professor X's son. And Legion is an ultra powerful mutant who has multiple personality disorder. And each one of his different personalities has a different power. And he has a legion of personalities going on in his head. So he has a legion of power. So he is immensely, in certain comments, he's like a reality shaper. He is doing whatever he wants, pretty much. So the show, especially in the opening pilot, told you the story, and then it had a moment where he's in a mental institution, and you're like, wait a minute, is everything we just found out fake? So there is big references in this episode. Even the all white, even the way it was shot was just so reminiscent of that pilot of Legion. But then Legion immediately got into it within the pilot and let you know that, well, that stuff wasn't exactly fake, what you saw, but it wasn't exactly real. And there's some whole other stuff going on, which I think the next episode of Moon Knight will be about, like explaining what this is and whether or not what we saw is real, what isn't. Right. Why there's a laughing hippo. There's a lot of questions right now.
Right. And just all the questions that keep rising up. Like, as I mentioned, not understanding if all of this is real. Is this a trick? Like, it could just be a mind trick to keep Mark down and keep him oppressed. I mean, it could be a lot of things, right? Like, we see in here, as I mentioned, we see the psychiatrist of the hospital is Harrow. And he's basically expressing that everything Mark has been doing, seeing, and saying, they're figments of combinations of different things that have been going on inside the psychiatric hospital. They're figments of his imagination and the things that he's doing in the psychiatric hospital. Like, he's trying to live out what he sees in that Tomb Buster movie, right? That Tomb Buster movie, which is like Tomb Raider / Raiders of the Lost Ark type situation, Indiana Jones type shit, right? And that's why the reason why I say it could be a trick is because it's the way things are so both overtly and covertly displayed as the camera pans around the hospital, which makes me think, they're pouring it on so fucking heavy. It's like, is this Amit, or is this one of the gods fucking with Mark, right? Possibly Amit. Is this someone doing this to keep him away from, potentially reuniting with Khonshu, potentially stopping Harrow, right? Because you got to keep him fucked up in his mind in order to stray him off the path of the mission. And as I said, like the overt and covert ways that it's kind of devious too, right? Like, because literally everything, absolutely everything, from the people to the objects and items that we've seen in previous episodes, it shows up again in this hospital. As the camera pans, you see the overt things like the Rubik's Cube, a patient's playing with it. The other, a lot, not all, but a lot of the other patients and the workers are people that both Steven and Layla have interacted with previously in the previous episodes that we've seen them, like Donna, his boss, or DC Kennedy, the black lady with the bald head, like the cupcakes that and the goldfish itself, like his alleged one finned goldfish.
Khonshu on the paper, everything.
Khonshu on the paper, like that's the more covert stuff, right? The lady drawing the pencil drawing of Khonshu, and it's Khonshu in his bird form, right? The clock on the wall with the moon shapes on the hands.
The moon shape in Harrow's office on his desk. The moon
shapes in Harrow's office. Harrow has like canopic jars all in his office, like which are in ancient Egypt, but they use in their tombs that to hold like the heart, the certain vital organs that you would need to pass over when you get to the afterlife. Like the whole idea, like first of all, like just this random completely white space, and his office just happens to be Egyptian themed, and then again you have these random sarcophagi randomly placed in this, like it just seems like too coincidental. And then even what I found interesting, the clock on the wall, it was purposefully very distinct ticking sound. If you remember earlier when you saw the mummies, which are actually the priests, you saw those mummies, you hear that ticking, that clicking sound. That's possibly, that also could be like, oh no, that's just the clock ticking. So there's all of these, because there seems to be an answer for everything, which I'm like, okay, someone's fucking with Mark's mind right now, or he is trapped in a deep nether region of the mind or something else, because there's no way that like there's a 1-to-1 correlation for everything he's done in the last 4 episodes inside this psych ward, right? Like he even has the Moon Knight action figure. That took the cake. Like that was like, oh, you trolling this man all day.
Which killed me as a collector of Marvel Legends action figures, because the Moon Knight action figure is currently going for $80 on eBay until they're about to release some new ones for the series, but right now the only one you can get is the one that's the comic version, and because there's Moon Knight, his hype is out, $80. Right. So he just threw it on the ground. I was hurt.
This shit is This shit is wild. And it even Mark, like after he started coming out of they put him under anesthesia or whatever it was, like after he started coming out of that, he even was like, wait a fucking minute, like no, I got shot a second ago. This can't be all imaginary stuff. Like, he even saw that painting, the oil painting of the Coke Town, the Amit Coke Town, I'm calling it. Like, it's just a painting. Like, no fucking way. You were there, my guy. And I know how he feels. And it's trying to give you that sense, right? Like, understanding how he feels. There's even a point, though, where it starts to go back into being surreal once again, when he goes through the hallways and the hallway starts tilting and things start sliding down the hallways. And this happened to Steven before, like when, for example, when he was being chased by Khonshu, or so he thought, chased by Khonshu in the storage unit. And it's just so many parallels and just fucked up things happening that crossover between between surreal and real, that makes me think, okay, this is somebody else is doing this to him, or is this like almost like Marcus trapped in his mind?
All right, I will give you 2 reasons that I have why it is somebody else doing this to him, and he's trapped in some type of mind trap of either his creation or someone else's creation. The first one is that he sees Mark and Steven see each other, and they both remember being shot.
Right. As separate entities, like, and they don't see each other through mirrors or reflections. They see each other in the flesh and touch.
They're physically together, which leads me to believe that they're trapped inside his mind or something like that. And then the second thing is that, let's see, who is it at that point? It is Mark who finds the Amit's statue, right? He goes into Alexander the Great's mouth,
That's Steven, because Steven knew all of the details about Alexander the Great and all that other stuff, and Steven was like, "Oh."
But that's Mark. That's Mark at that point, because Mark had just confessed to Layla about what he did.
That afterwards, after Steven's the one who puts his hand down the throat, pulls up the thing, and then after, when Layla shows up and Layla demands to speak to Mark, that's when it switches.
Okay, there we go. Well, either way, they have it right. They have now. is it like possession of it is one thing where he just can't take it off his body? Because I'm like, you just shot the dude. Why don't you just take the thing and you're done with it, right? It's over. But it must be something where now that he has it, there must be some other key to unlocking Amit, and that's what he needs from him.
Could it be Amit, as you say, I think you're alluding to, like it being Amit herself that is like essentially taking over Mark, because right now Khonshu's not there, right? Khonshu got
Amit
sealed
and
away.
Harrow are definitely doing this. And that's why Harrow's asking these questions and trying to get him to confess something that will open up this key that they need.
Right. And we do know that, at least from the experience of what Mark says is, or what Khonshu even said, like Khonshu couldn't do all that stuff, like team up with Mark and do all this other stuff until Mark was at the point of being near death, right? And we're here again, where Mark is either dead or near, or I would imagine he's near death, not 100% dead yet, but like at that instant. And even for us, it seems like a long amount of time has passed. It could just be seconds where all of this is actually occurring, right? Like we've learned that from people like he who cannot be named, right? Or we learned that like he at the end of the time, like the things that we may see that seem like it's taking a long time is actually like milliseconds, right? So all this stuff could be happening at once. And we also like what I was thinking about, what is this place? I was like, this could be some psychic like holding pain, a plane of the mind. This could be like just this mental trap that Amit and Harrow has him in. Is this also potentially the overvoid? Now, I do know in the Moon Knight comics, the overvoid is a place where the Egyptian gods, in the show, the overvoid is a place where the Egyptian gods reside. If you remember during that trial that they had when Khonshu was just fucking yelling his head off and being a terrible defense attorney, that he yelled to them, y'all need to come back into the open with the people and stop hanging around in the overvoid. Like stop hanging around in Club Med and come outside. And I'm wondering, like, because at the very end, the last frame of this episode, we see Taret, which is that hippo god. And I'm like, well, potentially there's other gods in there, right? Like, why would just a random hippo god be there? So I'm wondering, this is that place.
I would definitely concur 100% with that. And that's foreshadowing set up, why else would they mention the overvoid unless you're going to see an overvoid?
Right. And then I mentioned the sarcophagus earlier, like when Mark, it was Mark, he saw the one rumbling sarcophagus, opened it, out pops Steven. All right, we friends. Then as they're walking through the hallway, we see a third sarcophagus. And remember, Ben, you kept saying that's the third, there's a third altar. I believe that could be the third altar.
Oh, 100%.
And also then it's like, well, if all the altars are here, then they have to be someplace else. They can't necessarily, they may not necessarily be inside Mark's mind. Or it has another altar taken over, and this is what it looks like when you're trapped in Mark's mind.
They're definitely, I would say probably all of them. Mark's mind is in the overvoid. The overvoid. That's what I would say. Mark's mind is in the overvoid, and since Mark's mind is in the overvoid, you're getting all of his mind in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And really, while I know I'm like, and everyone's listening, like I'm throwing out more questions to you than answers, but these are the things you have to think through while we like barrel into episode 5. And also some of the other hints you're given through this episode, like when Layla and Mark, Steven are just first walking towards the tomb, like, they're walking through the canyons. They have the whole I'm traveling montage, which is actually very Planet of the Apes. The original movie I just saw for the first time a few weeks ago. Fucking
shout
hilarious.
out to the Backlit podcast.
Shout out to that podcast. But like they're doing the traveling, and then like they see very prominently a goat, right? And that's common to see the goats in those types of cliffs. Those goats can climb that shit. But I do want to say that goats do have symbolism. Like typically the appearance of a goat, like as a spirit, it's usually symbolic of new opportunities, greater heights you can reach in life. It's also potentially could be a good sign that, you're going to achieve something greater. And then at the very end, as I mentioned, you see Taret, which is the hippo god. And in Egyptian mythology, Taret is the protective Egyptian goddess of childbirth and fertility. She's known as the Lady of the Heaven, the Mistress of the Horizon, she who removes water, Mistress of pure water. Mark/Steven fell into water. And when you think about like when you're a child, you're in the amniotic sac, there's water you're swimming essentially, there's water around you. So we may potentially see Steve and Mark get reborn. literally or figuratively.
Yeah, I see that. And as we talked about with Dr. Drea, the fragmentation of his personality is what we've seen with these 3 different personalities. And we might see a synthesis of all 3 of them by the end of the series, or at least them coming to terms with each other where they can all work together and not deal with the drama that they've had. Also, while we're talking water and that whole falling sequence, I definitely want to give a shout out to the film Snatch, which features Brad Pitt getting knocked out in the middle of a boxing ring and falling backwards into a pool. And then also both of them, I want to say, influenced the recent Bel Air reboot where Will gets knocked out and falls into the pool and then has the sequence where he's underwater.
The vision of his future and what his path should be or may not be. And are you going to take your crown and all the other stuff? And it's the same situation.
Yeah, and it's the baptism by water, type sequence. Yeah, so there we go.
Yeah. So the circle of life and death all at once. And that's a prominent theme of like Egyptian mythology as well. Like just, everything is happening at once. There is everything and nothing at the same time, right? Like, and that cycle. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And when you think about, okay, what's going on here and what's going to happen next?
I once read, I know a lot of people have read it, or read parts of it, at least it's a long book, the Metu Neter. And it's a book about like Egyptian philosophy and mythology and everything. And I really love some of it, especially how it talks about like the essence that we're all from and how we all return to this essence. And it's just like this giant pool of energy. It's really dope, philosophical thinking.
Philosophical shit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Tell me if you had any more thoughts on the themes for this episode.
I think that's about it. Like I say, I talked about this before in our preview episode. I did have an issue, and we're going to talk about this a little bit when we get into some of the characters, with the tonal shifts in this series. And I felt like this episode in particular had some of the biggest tonal shifts, and sometimes it was hard to deal with. Now, on my rewatch, when I watched this episode fresh, after not having watched them all 4 at once, and just watching this all by itself, I enjoyed this episode. I still thought some of the tonal shifts were a little wild. I still think some of the characters for the series are a bit very much undefined. And
explain that. Who's undefined you?
I think Layla is very undefined. I think Steven in this episode, goes back on stuff that he was defined by. And now it's like, wait, I thought you stood for this. And that doesn't seem to be the case. In particular, the opening of this episode when Layla is trying to get Steven away from these foolish, I don't know what they are, dudes who have a machine. Henchmen, goons, the goon squad. Union of goons in the MCU. They roll up with their truck with a machine gun on it, that they can shoot from a distance and blow her away, but they don't. Right. She manages to kill them. And then Steven walks up and is like, "Oh, that's nice, honey."
Well, that's not exactly what happened, Benz, because I also rewatched the episode a few times, and I remember you had said that to me earlier. I'm like, yeah, he didn't. It's not so much he didn't react; he just didn't know what to say. Like, when it happened, and he just looked at her and stared at her like, "Oh, you're capable of this," to me, and he just looked at her. And she was like, "What?" And then the scene, and then they cut away, right? So I don't think it's so much that Steven didn't react, or just say it's okay, honey. Later, it's just like, okay.
Yeah, a second later though, he's loosey goosey over her, So it's like he doesn't.
Well, that's not the first time he's loosey goosey.
But he questions every time Mark murders anyone, and this dude, she just bodied these people. I get it, it's life or death, but Mark is usually in a life or death situation.
But Ben is a double standard, okay? He's fucking loving this chick, right? Like you can tell. Yep. Like I said this before, Steven, from the moment he laid eyes on her, was already enamored with Layla. And Layla could fucking probably murder someone in cold blood in his face. And he'd be like, well, she probably had good reason. And you know what? When you look at the difference between even as a short history, but Steven's history with Layla versus Steven's history with Mark, it's all contention with Mark. There's no, at least up until this point, up until when they embrace in the psychiatric hospital, there's no camaraderie there. It's, yo, I'm just doing you a favor, get out my body, all this other stuff. It's contentious. Whereas with Layla, it's more cooperative. So already just off break, he has this a different way of looking at Layla and feeling with Layla and believes, and I would imagine things like Layla is thinking things through. Also, someone's going after Layla with a bunch of guns. They've been, it's not like someone just randomly pop up, like they've been chased. You understand?
Yeah.
So he knows what time it is. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I don't think it's so much Steven didn't react. It was just like, well, what else the fuck else we gonna do?
All right, but also if we talk about characters, and we're about to get into this, I feel that Layla is just kind of undefined. And I think this is a bigger problem with Marvel right now in the MCU, is like where they have these archetypes of their characters that they're trying to just fall back on. Like even Mark Steven is like, you know, it's like Mark especially comes off to me sometimes like a Hawkeye, you know, just different.
It's just so much, then it's not so much that they're undefined. You feel like they're just fitting into a mold already created.
Yes. And Layla and a lot of the women in the MCU especially fall into this, where they're just not very defined as characters outside of being tough, action, independent, strong women, you know? And that's pretty much it. And jokes. Because everybody in the MCU got jokes. You know, so that's like, and that's pretty much it. And that's been a problem with like Kate Bishop, the new Black Widow, Layla. I mean, I can't even say Cersei from Eternals because she ain't even, you know. Yeah.
What about Black Widow? Not Black Widow. What about Wanda?
Wanda's a pre-established character, and she's, you know, having this huge arc, you know, and I definitely feel Wanda's arc. You know, we already talked about how Monica is like undefined as, you know, just like
right. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if is it undefined or underdefined, right? Like because they haven't had time to. Like Layla's technically it's very new, right? You know,
yeah,
so,
but she's having time in the series and not doing much with that time.
Yeah,
Wake
that
up,
I can see that.
You know, fight mummy. You know,
because,
like that. Yeah,
we're getting the pieces peeled away slowly about Layla, but also she's not the main thing, right? Like, and I think that's also what you're identifying, that it's clear that she's not the main thing because they're not really writing anything else for her. So
no. And I don't feel like we're really getting to know Mark Steven. I mean, a little bit more, I guess.
They're still keeping the shroud over our heads. Like they're still not telling us. And episode 4, this episode to me being the penultimate. Well, it's not really by definition penultimate, but like it's the most important conceptually of the series. Because this is the turning point to just kind of either throw away everything you've learned already or just recontextualize what you've been seeing. So, you know, I just think that it's because maybe they reveal all on episode 5, right? And maybe they still keep us in the dark. But right now, the shroud is still over.
Yep.
We're in the fog of war still.
Yeah, we will see.
Yeah. As you said, like, let's get more into these characters. Stephen Grant, Mark Spector, Moon Knight, Mr. Knight, played by Oscar Isaac. I saw there was that one scene in the beginning, like I was like, okay, they were being a little tongue in cheek to me when they got to the tomb and Layla was like just prepping them. She was putting on his harness and Steven was like, oh, I feel like I've been waiting for this my whole life. The adventure, I mean, right? And then Layla randomly stands up in front of him and it's like Oscar was making these weird faces and stuff. And I'm just like, wait a minute, were they trying to imply something else? Like it was definitely to me sexual implication there, but also like it was a double entendre moment.
Definitely, and also very Planet of the Apes once again. Look, Planet of the Apes is iconic, folks. Watch that first movie, man. They get down.
Oh gosh, Steven, as I said already, he's open when it comes to Layla. Every time they spoke for more than 2 seconds, this man's is in her mouth, just staring at her like, he hangs on every word she says. And again, it's like, is this attraction just simply because it has to be more than just like he likes her, he thinks she's cool, and that's probably the longest a woman has ever spoken to him. But it's also like he is also Mark. So the deep-seated feelings, the truth of Mark's essence is coming in through Steven. Just like when Steven literally tells Layla the truth about why Mark is keeping her away. Like Mark is the heart. Steven is the heart of Mark, if you will. So I wonder that's also why he's so open for her.
Yeah, once again, like we discussed with Dr. Drea, you know, she informed us that multiple personalities usually take the place of it being different facets of a person where they will like, and she even talked about how in the Moon Knight comic by Brian Michael Bendis, and I brought this up before as well, he beautifully showed where it was like these different versions of in the mind would work together and be like, okay, we need this type of person right now. So boom, you take control. All right, we need this type of person. Boom, you take control. And so I think that's what we're headed towards, and that's what we're seeing with these characters.
Yeah.
Or this
and
character.
right before descending further into the tomb, Stephen mentions it's a nice way to die. Like when he was just talking about the fact, that the tomb is all decked out and Pimp My Ride and all that. And he says a nice way to die, which is really a foreshadowing of the rest of the episode, right? It's a foreshadowing on him, as a foreshadowing on where his character is going, and then what happens, to, like you said, maybe there is everything gets melded back together into one. I don't know.
Yep. Part of this episode that I had a lot of contention with was
I knew it.
Yeah, Mark making Steven punch himself in the face. And then the falling out of the screen, like, and I'm just like, oh.
No, it was just the vibe you didn't like. Like, the
vibe
tone.
I didn't like. The tone was such a, like, and I even asked Dr. Drea about that. I wanted to make sure, and she said, yeah, but, I think it's the tone is what really does it in that scene where it's like, oh, God.
It was too slapstick for you? I mean, I think it made sense, but it's also just like, I guess you said, is it deviating from the respective tone, or the respectful tone rather?
The respectful tone, yeah. It felt deviating from the respectful tone where I was like, all right. But like I said, on rewatch, I wasn't like, oh, this ruined the show for me. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, ugh, that's goofy. The second time I was like, all right, goofy, keep moving.
Damn.
He still took that double tap later on, so.
Right. And we don't even see Moon Knight, Mr. Knight, because the suit is gone, because Khonshu got hung up in the rafters like a retired jersey with all the other rubbish gods, at least according to Osiris.
Yeah, a bunch of them hoes too, boy.
A bunch of them hoes, which makes you then question, like, okay, well, who the hell is the Ennead? Who the hell are y'all to? I mean, granted, it seems like what they're doing makes sense because the whole world hasn't descended into darkness or chaos yet. But it's just like, well, damn, what did these fucking gods do to get hemmed up like this? Yeah. And there was like at least 40 of them. All fucking hanging from the MSG, hanging from the garden, like rafters. Like, I just didn't understand, like, well, what the fuck did they do to get put up in there? And it's that many fucked up gods, like, or is it just someone like Khonshu where they just didn't agree with his methods and it was like, yo, you doing too much, bro. You're on timeout for 1,000 years.
Mans was up there like these Marvel Legends behind me, boy. Like, collect them all. Gotta catch them all.
Like, for real, bro. All right. Let's talk about Layla El Fuli, played by May Callum-Way.
Boy.
Once again, I hear what you're saying about
episode of L's for this woman.
Big L's for her. And I hear what you're saying about, how she's being approached. But, I think, like, it's just happening more slow than we would like. But to me, she's, again, getting the raw end of the deal when it comes to this relationship or lack thereof of relationship with Mark. When she questions how, like, when Steven says to her, oh, well, the reason why, Mark is pushing you away because he's trying to not make sure you don't end up being Khonshu's avatar. She's just, she gets pissed and she's like, y'all think y'all could have talked to me because I still wanted to see my husband and all this other stuff. And for her, it's Mark once again making decisions under the pretense of protecting Layla, but and I see why she's mad. It takes away her agency. It takes away her voice. It takes away her role and her part of being in a relationship because it's clear she still wants the relationship with Mark. She's still very much in love with this man and still wants to be with him. Like she didn't want this divorce, right? He claims he did this to protect her.
I mean, Mark is so grimy.
He's grimy for this.
It's like I just have nothing because it's like he doesn't even give her any explanation either. Basically he's like, yeah, I was there when your dad got popped, and then I came over and smashed.
Well, first of all, he didn't say it like that.
He didn't have to.
That's what it sounds like, yes. But also, like, when you're talking about something wild, sensitive, and it takes time for the words to come out, but then someone literally busts in the room, Harrow and friends. So he didn't have time.
But them words could have come out at any point. Like, you were there when her dad got popped, and then you went and married the woman?
Yeah. It's grimy shit. And just representative of what Mark has been doing as far as I can see all the time in this relationship, making decisions for her, doing things like, oh, I'm gonna protect you. Like, oh damn, I this guy got killed on my watch. Let me go protect his daughter. All the stuff that you think is noble, but it's just fucked up. And Layla puts it really nicely here. She says about protecting her, she says that wasn't his call to make. I don't need protection. What I need is honesty. And that has seemed to be sorely lacking in their relationship all throughout.
Also, Layla had a line where I question, is she using this man, right?
Well, I agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, she says Mark doesn't, the suit was his best feature, and he doesn't even have that.
Right. And then after hearing, when I saw your note about that, and then this whole thing about needing protection language, she wants honesty. That's a real line. But also, if you look a little deeper, it's also like, is there some part of her that actually wants the suit? Like, and the reason why I say that is because, as we see, she does not have closure about her father, right? And she knows that, like, part of her father's mission was basically to say, like, the gods, they walk among us, the Egyptian gods walk among us, like all this stuff is real, da-da-da-da. And having a suit like that and having access to that type of power would absolutely corroborate everything her father had worked for. So it's just like, does she want revenge? She doesn't have closure yet. Does she perhaps want that power and want to be able to enact some form of change in her mind?
All right, now hot take, and I already said this on a previous episode. I already said that Layla was going to end up in the suit. But my second hot take now is that Layla and Mark Steven end up not together by the end of the series, and Layla does take over the role of Moon Knight because Oscar Isaac is only contracted to do this series, and boom.
Yeah.
It would F up all the fanboys. And also, I do not think that they should be together by the end of the series. Like, there's no way.
I think it's been a lot of emotional abuse that Layla has had to endure. And the emotional abuse, the lack of love, like, you could see she is craving to have the closeness that she wants with her husband. Like, when they walk in the tomb and Steven's like, oh wow, look at you. He's talking about the fucking Sphinx statue. But she's looking at him like, oh, you're talking about me. Like she has that moment of connection where she's like, oh, that's Mark loving me. Because maybe they did have a loving relationship or loving approach at first, and then it got to this point. And that's not fair to her.
Now, do you want to explain to me the mummy priest?
Yeah, so when Steven and Layla were navigating the tomb, and they ended up in that room with the table that guy ends up getting sliced up on.
Yep.
Layla or Steven, they explained that this was the place where the Heka priests were I guess entombed with the pharaoh, right? And the Heka priests, they're basically the magical priests. They're the sorcerers, and they're supposed to be basically like servants of the pharaoh and servants of when you're in the afterlife to help serve the gods and keep everybody needing what they need, right? So these were so they also said, she says, oh well, if anybody crossed the path, like if anybody crossed or essentially just came up in here that had no business being in the tomb or was fucking with the pharaoh or anything like that, the Heka priest was there to take care of them and deal with them. And that's what we're seeing. We're literally seeing, and we see two of them. They actually are, I don't even want to say they're living, but they're alive, walking around.
Undead.
They're undead. There it is. They're undead regulating. Like, yo, why the fuck are you here? And that's why they grabbing niggas up, cutting out their vital organs, saving them, shit like that. So those are the Heka priests that you see. They're not just like random mummies they threw in there. Yep. They were already in there.
Okay, got it. Yep. Yeah. And that made sense. And, so there's just undead in the Marvel Universe now. Why not?
What's it? What if already showed us the zombies, the undead? So
true indeed.
There you go. And speaking of the mummies, these mummy priests, the Heka priests, look, once again, that line of she's tough and she's resilient as fuck. Like, she saves herself with absolutely no help. Usually, a lot of times, at least in the past, you see like these situations where the person is close to death or close to being defeated, and then some random comes and saves the day. And lots of times, stereotypically, the woman would be in distress, and the man would come and randomly save them. This time, there's nobody. No one comes for help. It's literally Layla on her own. You see her, and I thought this was really cool how they did it when she got pulled into the darkness by the priest. and you hear the screaming, and you can't see or know what's going on. She pops out for a brief period and goes back into the dark, and then when you see her pop out again, she got the priest's arm, right?
Yeah.
And she's fighting off this nigga. So just to show that she scraps and she knows how to handle herself. I'm pretty sure it's reminiscent of a movie that's happened before, because it seemed very familiar, but like I just liked how they did that.
Yeah. And definitely very much, I mean, all this Raiders of the Lost Ark, Mummy, that definitely feels like, was it Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? You know, when somebody broke the seal, things started happening to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once again, when we just talk about the hurt and the pain that's going through Layla, like, and the fact that she hasn't found closure, and it's so fucked up how he does this. Harold is essentially taunting her, but he says in Egyptian, I believe, but he also uses the term or Arabic rather. He says my little scarab, and that was the nickname that Layla's father Abdullah El Fuli gave to her. Yeah, and for her to hear that, I'm sure she hasn't heard that since her father passed. That's hurtful as fuck beyond words, I would imagine. Her father's loss has hurt her deeply, and that's the reason why we went back about, well, is there maybe a reason why she might actually want to have the suit? Because it's related to all of this. And also another reason why that could be the case is when we're on the last part of this episode, when they're in the psychiatric hospital, Mark has the bingo, and like she walks up to him, she sees he has the bingo, and she goes, "Oh, I'll share it with you next time, I swear." Which is, if you think about it, that's the exact opposite of how, like, it's how Mark had been treating her, right? Like, he does things, makes decisions for her, and she just has to deal with it. Now it seems like, at least in this hospital, she's been doing things and taking things and saying, well, you know, it has to have been happening more than once, because she says next time. I'll share this with you next time, I swear. Is she really going to share it with him? Like, does she even have to?
No.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think she's going to end up as Moon Knight.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. We have Arthur Harrow, your boy, stringy hair, Ethan Hawke.
Oh, he got fresh up on this one.
He got fresh.
He
now
glowed
you
up
feel
on
a little
this
better about it.
Look, I was ready to follow him now. I'm like, let's go, bruh.
He got fresh, but then he got like a porn stash going on.
True. Yeah.
And the glasses.
I just think Ethan Hawke ain't the one for me, you know, in general. Like, you know, I like Ethan Hawke as an actor, but ain't no way I'm following that man to, you know, hell and all that. Nah. Ain't happening.
We see him personified or expressed as Mark Stevens, psychiatrist in this mental institution, which also explains, like I said, if this is Amin's doing or otherwise, this explains when I kept saying the one-to-one relationship, why every time like Mark could say, I was just in that village. They go, nah, the village is a painting. It was like, well, I was Moon Knight. Nah, that's your action figure, right? It could explain why Harrow is such an adversarial role into Mark and Stevens' life, because as a patient, he sees his psychiatrist as his adversary. So it's just a lot of just weird things going on that I'm like, this is not, it aligns, but it's like it's aligning too perfectly. Arthur, he stirs shit up. He fosters the vision when he tells Layla that Mark knows, you know, knows all the deets about the father's death, right? We saw him shoot Mark twice in the heart. He says twice, I can't save anyone who can't save themselves or who won't save themselves, which is very much the language that a psychiatrist will use. Like, yo, you need to help yourself if you want to get better. But he says this to Mark / Steven, and it's just like, wait, are you trying to help me? Like, are you just trying to be funny?
Bit of both, I think.
All right.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, because thing is, like, he would help him if he would get down. You know, it's like a get down or lay down situation. You know, that's what it is. It's like, you know, hey, if you get down with Ahmed, you won't wake up to this reality that I'm preaching. That's what he's telling people. You know, wake up to this.
Wake up to this, Sunny D, my nigga. Oh my God.
You got Sunny D? Not that purple stuff.
And as always, Harold has to troll. As the psychiatrist, he says that when he's talking about that Tombbuster movie, he says he liked the villain. Wink, wink. I get you, guy.
Shout out to my man's in the Tombbuster movie, though, Rosser.
Oh, Russell?
No, Rosser. It's Rosser.
Rosser, the kid?
Rosser.
Is that the kid?
That's the kid. The ward. the ward of Dr. Stephen Grant,
Oh, God.
Rosser, on their journey in South America, which I learned from the Marvel Wiki and also from closed captions. Rosser, because it just reminds me of the British word tosser, which, I'm like, damn, like that's a little too close.
Don't say that.
Yeah, it's a little too close right there. Yeah, tosser.
We do get to see the character Crawley again, played by Sean Scott. We've seen him previously as the gold living statue man that's just completely silent, basically a mime in the park. It's the complete opposite here in the psych hospital. He won't shut up. In fact, he is announcing bingo. He won't shut up. He won't stop talking, and he's also somewhat trolling because I was laughing because as he was calling his numbers when the black woman that was working for Harold, she went over to give Donna, remember the museum director, she went to give Donna her pills. And she's like, well, how you doing today, Donna? And Donna's like, well, he's not pulling any O's, right? And they're talking about, the O letter number combinations for bingo. Later on in that same scene, as the camera's pulling away, Crowley yells out, 73. And then he goes, nope, moving on. Like, he won't even let her win on that. So I was just like, okay, here, more trolling happening. But it was just so bugged out how they did this episode. Just the one-to-one of everything can be explained away that it's all in your head. Like, nah, bro.
Very Legion-esque. Definitely check out Legion if you haven't.
Yeah. Moving on to the Easter eggs, inspiration, and the music was more cinematic. I noticed that. Like, there wasn't, as far as I can tell, besides maybe the one chant that I heard, like there wasn't any contemporary music put into this episode. It was just score.
Yeah.
Layla trying to get over that broken path in the canyon in the tomb. It looked like every fucking movie from the 80s, from 80s or 90s or whatever these things were. Like, to me, when she was fighting the Heka priest, she looked like Ripley fighting the xenomorph alien queen thing.
It
like,
definitely.
It was the same like type of feeling, and the same like the sweat, the hair in the face, the bugged out eyes, this creature on top of you. Like, it was just very alien.
It definitely gave me Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade because, and this was even referenced in Lovecraft Country when they had that opening where they get into the tomb and they walk and there's this giant pit and there's like the leap of faith moment where you have to jump over the pit.
Yeah, and we see that in mad movies, right? There's that pit or canyon or whatever, or rift or gulf where they all do the same thing. They turn on a flare, they throw it down just to see how far does it go. It's like, can you make that jump or you gonna die off of hit damage, like fall damage, some shit like that. And so it was like every movie. I seen this in Star Wars. I seen this in Indiana Jones, The Mummy, the rattling sarcophagus. Like, come on, bro. And I had mentioned before Tomb Buster, like Tomb Raider / Indiana Jones shit.
Yeah. Straight up.
And on that movie, we see that starring character, Dr. Stephen Grant. And they were funny with this movie because, like you said, roster and all that, because they literally copied the tone of racism of these types of films, right? Like the ward being a boy of color, like some young boy of color that's always like, I don't know nothing, mister, but you the doctor here. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I don't know shit. That's why you are who you are. That's why you gonna get us out of here, the freedom master. Like that type of shit.
For anyone who's seen Hollywood Shuffle, and I know you have, Tatiana, there's a sequence where they're reviewing movies, and at one point they review an Indiana Jones type movie. I can't remember what the Cheyenne something. I can't remember what he's called. And it is like just ridiculous and out of control. And it's the same thing that they were touching on in this film.
Yeah.
If you your trigonometry and your geometry.
In that film, in the movie, the Tomb Buster movie, the bit we see them happen upon what Stephen Grant says is the statue of Coyolxauhqui, which is a lunar god of the Aztecs. Again, this whole idea of lunar moon gods in real life, quote unquote, being Khonshu this time is just a god of the Aztecs. That statue actually appeared to depict a many-faced person, reminding me of the many-faced gods, a la Arya Stark. In real life, though, Coyolxauhqui represents the moon in Aztec mythology. Her name means golden bells, and she actually had some hot fire behind her because she instigated her 400 brothers and sisters to kill their mother.
Wow.
So there's some problems going on
Like,
with these
how do
lunar
you coordinate
gods.
that?
How do you coordinate? But there's some problems going on with these lunar gods.
Leroy
and like I
Jenkins.
said, like there's some shit going on.
You just know one of them ran in there early.
Yes, of course. And again, just okay. Well, there's and that idea of the many faces, the many personalities, the many altars that are connected to being associated with a lunar god. Look at what Stephen is going through. Stephen/Mark. Yeah, we talked about the Heka priests, as I said, like they're essentially sorcerers. They have the magic, and also they have a close association with speech and the power of the word. And as we know, like as they repeated a few times this episode, the voice of an Egyptian god is their avatar, right? So and also like understanding in Egyptian mythology and magic particularly, they say that actions did not necessarily speak louder than words. Like words and actions were one and the same, and they were all meant to feel very like have power and magic behind them.
I feel that.
Yeah. We learned some more Egyptian stuff. We learned about Ushabtis, which are kind of those representative statues that you see they find the Ushabti of Amit. Kind of like Horcruxes almost if you're into Harry Potter. Ushabtis were actually placed in tombs in the graves along with all the other stuff, and they were intended to be like servants for the deceased, so they could be called upon to do help and things like that. So,
all right,
yeah. We see a bunch of shit about snake skins and self-regeneration. I'm like, yo, what the fuck is going on?
I think it's because they believe like snakes, if you use the snakes, then you would get, regenerative powers.
And I don't know, but was the snake skin not on an arm, like a severed hand?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Like they were attaching the snake skin to their arm, like giving themselves new skin.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And yes, Steven mentions he's flipping out because he's so fucking excited. He's like, yo, this is the long lost tomb of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, he was a king he's an ancient Greek kingdom of Macedonia, excuse me. And that's what Stephen sees written on the tomb. You see the Egyptian hieroglyphs, but also you see Macedonian language. Alexander the Great is known as the Great because of all of the alleged great things that he had did, but including being an incredible military leader. By the age of 30, he created one of the largest empires in history. Like it stretched from Greece to India. And if you ever studied Egyptology at all, you'll see like there was that period where the Greeks came in and they mixed a lot in with the Egyptian culture. And he was known for doing a lot of mixing. He was very mixy, and as they call it, cultural diffusion. So like they came out with things like Greco-Buddhism and shit like that. So and at the end of the day, Alexander was like, nah, I'm the Borg at this point. Call me Pharaoh. So
yeah, if you've ever seen, I studied it, and in high school we had a great history teacher, and they showed us the amount of landmass that he had conquered. It was insane, for this to have been done on horseback at the time, like they had just laid it out. And this is actually a real mystery to this day, where is the actual tomb of Alexander the Great? So it's cool seeing them bring this in. And him being the servant of Amit kind of makes him one of the first MCU supervillains.
Fast. And so was he indeed Amit's first avatar?
Yes, it seems to be the case. And so he was straight up, and I mean, as Alexander the Great was straight up murdering a lot of people, that pretty much goes in, straight in line with Amit and being a supervillain. Right.
So did Amit like give him that power to do that, right?
Or like, also being a superhero in the MCU, when you really get down to it,
Facts.
He, Alexander was just following Tony Stark and, other great ones. Look, all these guys got, glorious amounts of red in their ledger.
Glorious.
And
that's the end of the Easter eggs and credits and all that stuff. Ben, did you have any other additional things you wanted to mention?
Nah, shout out to Mark Spector for also having glorious amounts of red in his ledger. Like I say, it is like universal. Like once again, Dr. Drea, we were talking on Twitter today, and she asked me about Wanda. We also mentioned this on the episode, and I was calling Wanda on monsters. I usually do, but I also said that 99% of the MCU heroes are straight up monsters as well. So Moon Knight is just following the path laid down by his forefathers.
And with that, we conclude our review of episode 4 of Moon Knight. Thank you, everybody, so much for your love, support, and energy. Thank you for listening to Views from the 616. Be sure to be subscribed on your favorite podcast platform to For All Nerds in order to listen to Views from the 616. Follow us on your favorite social media platform at For All Nerds, at Views from 616. Make sure you're following myself at Tatiana King. Also, this gentleman here at DJ Ben Hameen. We also would appreciate so much if you support us in many other ways. We have a TeePublic page, which is our merch page. You see, I'm wearing the Inclusion is Revolution sweatshirt here. Ben Amin is wearing the beautiful Mohawk Storm on a motorbike. These are exclusive designs you can only find on our teepublic.com/stores/forallnerds page. Make sure you hit that up. And also, if you want to be part of the financial fam, join our Patreon, okay? Every tier is a special tier. Everyone gets special privileges, but that is how we keep our show running. Patreon.com/forallnerds. That's how we pay our staff. That's how we get to do cool things like this podcast and make sure we are giving you super duper amazing quality. And as always, be sure you're following us on Twitch, twitch.tv/forallnerds. That's where we do our live streams there. If you have Amazon Prime, you can actually link your account and get a free subscription every month. You just got to re-up to For All Nerds.